This is an ACU Centre for Liturgy podcast. Speaking of liturgy. In a world where fashion often influences the clothes we wear, how do we choose sacred vestments that are fit for celebrating the liturgy? Speaking of liturgy, Brother Steven Kropp, a priest of the Midwest USA province of the Capuchin Franciscan Friars Minor, who holds a Master of Arts in Liturgical Studies from the Catholic Theological Union in Chicago, reflects on the significance of liturgical vesture and how careful choices will help to enhance worship and lead us more deeply into the mysteries we celebrate.
As the American author Mark Twain was once reported to have said, "Clothes make the man. Naked people have little or no influence on society." Well, as I'm sitting here at my desk in the simple brown tunic and white cord of my Capuchin Franciscan habit, I may not be much able to comment on fashion. I am, however, keenly aware of the effect of what I choose to wear can have on others' perception of who I am and how I should be received. I'm sure most of you can think of times when you have carefully chosen your attire to fit your specific purposes. Maybe it's the proverbial power suit, or something chosen for comfort, but perhaps with a little flair as well. Even the simplest or sloppiest choices can make a statement which reinforces the slogan, "Clothes make the person." These choices both influence how we want to be viewed, but also how others might in fact view us. Think of judging the person who boards an airplane wearing pajamas and slippers. Not that any of us here would do that. Why, I wonder then, should it be different in choosing the clothing or vesture that we wear for the sacred liturgy? Choosing what we wear for the liturgy should be at least as significant as the choices we make to vest ourselves for all the important moments of our lives. We must consider what is proper to our role in the liturgy as priest, deacon, acolyte, matched with the occasion, whether it be feast, solemnity, funeral, or even just a daily mass, and appropriate for our own circumstances and even our own tastes. In an article on liturgical vestments by Jesuit John Lawrence for the New Dictionary of Sacramental Worship, he articulates it this way: just as any clothing manifests the person who wears it, so likewise does the Church, in liturgy, disclose its inner mystery through the wearing of special liturgical vestments. He then goes on to point out that the way we vest ourselves for liturgy not only has important significance at the moment, but the vestments we wear also bear rich historical and theological significance. While not necessarily overtly known to the ministers and the congregation, but they have an essential bearing in the overall celebration. Let me step aside for a moment here by way of example. Several years ago, when I lived in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, I presided regularly at a mother house of Franciscan sisters. As I arrived early each morning for Mass in their 20th century Italian Renaissance chapel, I was greeted by the sister sacristan, who made sure that there were vestments set out and waiting for me. It seemed to me, as I went there from day to day, that they had an endless collection of 1950s Gothic-style vestments. This in and of itself is not necessarily good or bad, but personally, I had a few issues. First, I'm about 2 meters tall and have a larger stature, meaning that it felt oftentimes that I was attempting to don the vestments that were intended instead for the Infant of Prague. The opening for my head was seldom an easy fit, and they often didn't fall far below my waistline. Finally, given that they were made for a time when the priest would have worn these standing at the high altar, I often put them on backwards so that the decoration could be seen by the congregation. While I didn't have much choice then in what I wore, when I once suggested to Sister that the chasuble was perhaps a bit too small for me, she said, "It's just fine. Put it on." This could show how perhaps bad choices might affect the liturgy in important ways, as I'm sure some of those dear sisters had more than one laugh at my expense on those early weekday mornings. How I longed to wear any number of the other chasubles I saw in their endless sacristy closets while I was waiting for Mass to begin. Bearing in mind that we need to make good choices about how we robe for the liturgy, let us consider what the Church has to say about our vesture. The general instruction to the Roman Missal, paragraph 335, says of liturgical vesture, "In the Church, which is the body of Christ, not all members have the same function. This diversity of offices is shown outwardly in the celebration of the Eucharist by the diversity of sacred vestments, which must therefore be a sign of the function proper to each minister. Moreover, these same sacred vestments should also contribute to the decoration of the sacred action itself." 9 short paragraphs later, it goes on to describe the beauty and nobility of vestments, being derived from the materials used and the design executed, which leads one to understand their sacred purpose and place in the liturgy. So it would seem that sacred vestments are not then peripheral to the celebration of the liturgy, but integral to it. Their shape, form, material, color, and adornment all help lead us more deeply into the liturgical celebration, or, as is sometimes the case, perhaps distract or detract from the mysteries we are celebrating. They are, perhaps even catechetical. While not attempting to use imagery for the sake of getting the point across, like a well-painted fresco or a beautifully executed stained glass window, nevertheless, the vesture we select can help convey a sense of the importance of what we are doing, the sacredness of the celebration, even the degree of solemnity of the liturgy of the day. They can also convey our indifference or carelessness, and as I suggested before, they are meant to convey an historical and theological context that grounds the celebration, like so many other elements, in the living tradition of the Church. They participate in the integrity of the liturgy, ensuring that every element is not merely someone's preference or a whim, but is essential to creating the whole. As we consider the many aspects required of the celebration of the liturgy, texts to be used, music to be sung, the homily, the decorations for the sanctuary, the placement of candles, the bread and wine to be used, I wonder how often we ever really consider what it is the ministers are to wear. Do I simply walk in the sacristy, open the closet door, and put on whatever happens to be hanging closest to me? Or do I actually stop and consider the significance of the vesture in light of the celebration? Do I check if it's clean and in good repair? Is it the correct color of the day? And are the ornamentations or materials appropriate for the celebration? While many of us won't be overly scrupulous about the vesture that is chosen, and few of us will be too much concerned about it, a healthy middle ground might be useful in assessing the situation. In our Capuchin constitutions, we have a maxim to choose the minimum necessary and not the maximum allowed. Perhaps a good liturgical take on that might be to never prefer the minimum, but carefully consider when the maximum might really be necessary. A contemporary example of this might be that of Pope Leo, who shows us somewhat of a middle ground between the sometimes voluptuous dress of Pope Benedict and the much more highly simplified choices made by Pope Francis. Pope Leo seems to make choices both on their historical and theological significance together with contemporary sensibilities. These considerations are much more than those of personal taste. The Church asks us to consider beauty and nobility when we are preparing every aspect of celebrating the liturgy. Let us apply that consideration liberally and not forget that clothes do make the liturgy. Make good choices.
That was Brother Steve Kropp reflecting on sacred vestments in the liturgy and choosing them well. The ACU Centre for Liturgy, which provides pastoral formation in liturgy across Australia and beyond, is pleased to provide this podcast, Speaking of Liturgy.